Oh, it's Jake Robbins. Look at that. He's back.
I'm back.
How you
I'm
doing?
back, baby. Yeah, I'm excited to be back. I was away for a while. I had a long trip to figure out, and that's just tough. That's tough.
And
to
it
be
was
away
like
out.
dog years of space news when you were gone.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be quiet because it's summer, and NASA chose violence.
There's drama in literally every area of your interest. Mars, science news, human space flight, politics.
Everything.
There was
Yeah.
chaos. So I brought a friend, Jake. You didn't even know about me booking this show until I just told you. By the way, I got Christian Davenport to join us to help catch you up. How's it going, Christian?
I'm great. How are you guys? Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
We're pumped to have you back.
I
think you've only been on here one time, which is a crime, to be honest.
I
Two
think
times?
that 2 times. I think.
2 times.
I think once was without me though. I think you did one. Yeah, maybe.
Still criminal. Only 2 times.
Still criminal. Yeah. Well, we got to get those numbers up. Rookie numbers.
Very rookie.
Yeah.
How do we start the show, Jake? Did you bring any beer back from Ireland?
No, I did not bring any beer back. I drank it all there, so that
Nice.
was that was a thing there. But I did, in the spirit of that, though, I did get one of these.
Look at you.
Is
Nice.
very good. I have a very gravelly voice, as you can hear, because I'm sick, and so what better than a little bit of whiskey, I guess. I'll see. I may not drink a lot of this. I might just be drinking a lot more of the water as I get through this, but we'll see how it goes.
You sound like you already drank a lot of whiskey.
I do, don't I? Yeah.
I'm working through this Boulevard Brewing Co., Jake. I'm on my last 1 or 2 space campers. So got some space camp going on here. What about you over there?
Well, first of all, I'm curious where you got that, but I confess I'm just doing like a bubbly and a
mixy?
DC. Yeah.
Double. Why 2 things at once of a similar variety?
It's a great question. I thought maybe the bubbly was done, and then I sat down at my desk to hang out with you guys. It's flat, but it's like half full. So I'm like, score.
Now you got 2 things.
Yeah.
And did I hear you call that a DC?
A DC, yeah, Diet Coke DC.
Okay, all right.
That's what they call it in the Beltway.
That's what they call it in the Beltway. Is that what I was going to say? Yeah.
That's
Brand
what my wife
loyalty.
called it. Yeah. So.
Yeah. That's Jake's
Brand
loyalty. Heard that,
loyalty.
which is bizarre. But
I have not. No.
All right, Jake, we're gonna let you pick. I gave you a briefing on what you missed when you were gone. We got maybe life on Mars. We got astronauts definitely not stuck, but increasingly stuck every day. And the Falcon 9 had a failure for the first time in 8 years since you were gone, and it's back flying.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that like the first thing I did was check to make sure all the rockets still worked. And the last time I was on the show 3 weeks ago, Falcon was flying, and it's flying today. So it looks like there wasn't any problems with that, right?
The fastest return to flight ever. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. That's a pretty good turnaround. I was actually really curious about that because I think, I don't know, maybe it was like a year ago, we were talking about anomalies and how, like, even when the last time they did it, which was years and years ago, and they had, the one blew up on the pad, the fast fire or whatever it was, like they came back in like 6 months, and that was notable. Everyone's like, wow, 6 months. Like, man, ULA would have been out for 18 to 24 to fix that one. Like, we would have just like not gone to space for 2 years if that had happened before. And I remember being like really shocked at 6 months. And I was really curious about a year ago, like, I wonder what would happen today. Cause like, that's a whole industry. That's a big deal now. Like they go out for 3 weeks, and how many launches did they miss? Like 12 or something, like it's a lot. So yeah, that's cool.
Not unrelated to the Starliner storyline, to be honest, right? Like,
yeah,
the major impact would have been if this went on longer, or if it was a thing that NASA was uncomfortable going ahead and flying with, because we had Cygnus flying on it like in 2 days or whatever, next week. Yeah.
No, like I think the 3rd.
Yeah. So we had that coming up, and then we're nearing the end of this crew rotation flight, and also there's Starliner drama. All of these things depend on Falcon 9 as well. So it could have been a incredible incident if this was something more significant than, a sensor line that they could just remove and keep flying without it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I'm curious.
Have any vibes on, like, did you underreact to the story like I did? Because I was like, it'll be fine. It'll be flying again in 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, like 15 days was that's how long they were out, something like
Yeah.
that. It's insane. I mean, and the thing too, essentially, was it Crew 9 that's coming up? Like that's on track for August, and Polaris Dawn gets pushed back a little bit, but kind of think like maybe that was going to get pushed back
Yeah.
anyway. That NASA's like go ahead, not just like it's not just that they're returning to flight, is that they're going to return to human space flight that quickly too, right?
Mm-hmm.
That just shows how much trust NASA has, in them and the rocket and everything they're doing to allow, like, yeah, go ahead, put our astronauts on, you're good. Like, wow.
The failure mode too, though. Like, I don't know if you took a poll of all of the people interested in space professionals, and were like, would you ride on a Falcon 9 tomorrow? I'm not sure there would have been a lot of people like, no, I'm gonna wait and see how this pans out. I would have been like, I get on one in 15 minutes after that failure. It'll be fine. There's been 300 and whatever in a row.
Right. Well, and then like if you launch it like 100 times in a year, like they did last year, they know that rocket so well, right? They know every little thing about it. I'm not sure how many times that particular booster had flown. I mean, but it's a booster they were familiar with, and it just sort of shows like after 15 flights or whatever it was, stuff breaks. And in this case, they had that one line and the oxidizer leak, but they know it so well they can just go back and show the data, and they've got all of the past heritage to go to the FAA and be like, here's the deal.
Yeah.
The FAA, yeah, okay, sign off on that. You're good to go.
Do you think that this spooked anybody? Because there's a history of this in terms of in the 80s, NASA was like, we're going to make a space shuttle, and literally everything is going to fly in space shuttle. It's going to be the one vehicle to rule them all. And it happened. And like all commercial launch stopped, all NASA human space flight launched, all science missions stopped. Like there was like everything grinded to a halt while they tried to, resolve Challenger. And after that, we saw commercial stuff move off of that. That's when, Delta and Atlas kind of came back into the scene in terms of that kind of thing. Ariane taking up a lot of commercial stuff. Do you think anyone got spooked by this where it was like, wow, Falcon just went down. We can't do anything. Like literally, like we're hooked into this in every which way. NASA human spaceflight, NASA science, all commercial stuff. Like just everything's connected to it. I'm kind of curious to see if anyone does anything about it,
Yeah, I mean, it highlights the huge reliance that that everyone, right, the government, commercial sector, science, NASA, the Pentagon has on the Falcon 9. How much is riding on it, and it also just sort of shows like the gap between SpaceX and all the other launch providers, right? Mm-hmm. It's not that big a deal if New Glenn is up and running, if Ariane 6 is, which obviously is like launching at some sort of a cadence, if Neutron's online, and all these other rockets that are meant to compete with Falcon 9 that we've been waiting for. It's like it just shows that they're not there yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's also, to your point though, Jake, of like, is anyone going to do anything? It's like, what are they going to do? Like, there's not a lot to do at the moment. I don't know. A national buyback of all the Atlas Vs? Like what? I don't know what other things that we have out there.
Yeah, I mean, they are doing something about it. This might just be bad timing, right? Like, Vulcan is like this close to becoming operational. New Glenn's around the corner. So like they are working on that per se, working on it as much as you can work on it. So it may just be bad timing, but it certainly is like a lesson to highlight, right?
It's good proof of the whole, like, this and the Starliner situation. Good proof of having two providers is the strong strategy. And also, SpaceX still waiting on literally anyone else to put pressure on them. Not to, like, perform better, but, like, there's no competitive pressure on SpaceX in terms of pricing or launch availability or anything right now. The ones that are out there, we're happy to get all their stock bought up by Amazon, but take Amazon out of the equation, take the two outliers out, SpaceX and Amazon, and the market is pretty weird. And, like, is there enough to have a second competitor that's operating at the pace that SpaceX is?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, even honestly, SpaceX, when you look at how much of their launches are Starlink, right? They're returning to flight. We're all pumped about that. It was 3 Starlink launches in a row. So,
Yeah, they didn't put too many customers out then, I guess.
No, right. Like they missed a couple of Starlinks. They sunk a bunch into the ocean, and they put, a couple more got delayed 2 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting though. I mean, you talk about the competition and where Vulcan is, and that. I mean, they obviously had that good flight, and then I think it was a really big deal that they said, we're not going to fly Dream Chaser on the next certification flight. That we're going to fly essentially a dummy payload, because there was so much pressure put on them by the Pentagon. There was a lawyer, or a letter written by one of the top Pentagon officials saying, like, you got to move faster. And I think ULA was like, does not want to fly a mission without getting paid for it. But I think it's a big deal that they're moving ahead and doing that. And it just sort of shows that the community, i.e. in this case, the Pentagon, is saying we need other providers beyond just Falcon 9 and SpaceX, right?
Yeah.
You got to step up.
Yeah, I was kind of musing the other day about what it must be like in the ULA boardroom. The pressure to get that rocket moving is like, it's got to be unbelievable. Like it just all with Amazon and the DoD and NASA all just like staring down at this rocket, like, when are you going to fly? Like it must be just the worst. And like, are they still trying to sell this company? I don't know where that thread has gone. Is that any news on that front while I was gone? But I assume someone is looking at that, right?
That I heard, that was like, I mean, it's been an avalanche. So maybe it's already sold and I just missed it. There's been so much other news.
I think they were getting close to a deal, and then whoever was buying them was like, there's a lot of hobby photographers that are just taking pictures of your rocket and selling them on the open market. And we've got to clamp down on that if this business case closes. So that's right. Yeah.
What? Okay. Yeah. I haven't dug.
I don't know what's going on here. Yeah.
But that one's weird, right? Yeah. Okay. All right.
Has Tori tweeted about this yet? I haven't followed up on.
No, but he did tweet. I think it's an old picture I think it's an Atlas picture going off with some. Yeah, it's a really cool camera angle of the Atlas coming off.
Oh yeah.
But he is tweeting lots of pictures of hardware, which is clearly meant to, as a signal to the Pentagon, like, okay, we're moving, we're going to launch, we've got plenty of rockets, we're going to be able to meet your requirements. Don't write nasty letters and leak them to the press. Like, we're moving along here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Starliner, because apparently while we were doing the pre-show, NASA put up some release that, Chris, you read, but we did not yet. So what the hell's going on here? Help me out. What's happening?
So I mean, they did this static fire of the of all the thrusters, or not all of them. Like I think all but one. Right. Yeah. So it was 27 of 28. And from what I heard, that went really well. But they're saying they want to take more time to like evaluate all the data. The teams are taking their time to analyze the results of recent docked hot fire testing. So okay, like. I mean, that's good. We had thought that by the end of this week, they would have that sort of agency level, it's like a flight readiness review and, kind of look over all the data, decide, as they call it, the flight rationale, make sure everything's safe to come home, that would happen this week. And now they're saying that's not going to happen this week. That's going to go into next week. And on the one hand, I think you can say, well, that's not a great sign. What did they see? Why is this taking more time? Does this mean that there is, an alternative, that they're going to look to SpaceX and Dragon to fly the crew home? In the last briefing, they always left the door open and they said, that's a possibility. And that's the importance of having two providers, as we were just talking about, that if we need Dragon to come get the astronauts, we can do that. But, our primary goal, and I stress this over and over again, particularly Mark Nappy from Boeing, saying like, no, they're going to come home on Starliner. So that's sort of the one version of it. On the other hand, I mean, it's hard. We haven't had a briefing and a chance to ask questions about the status now. It's been about a week. But you would like to think, if you're giving them the benefit of the doubt that they're being super careful, right? That this is lessons learned, particularly from Colombia, and that they don't. There's no reason to bring them home tomorrow or the next day or next week. There's plenty of food, plenty of water, plenty of resources on the station. They can stay. The batteries appear to be good, well past the 45-day limit. Let's not mess around. Let's look under every rock. Let's really test out all these thrusters. They're going to need it. So on the one hand, you say like you can just see the stories. Like if it's like, there's this pressure on them now to come home. And then if they leave tomorrow and something happens, and then there's an investigation that shows, well, wait, if they had done X, Y, and Z tests, they would have known that the thrusters didn't work or that the helium line, they didn't have as much margin, right? And then it's like, well, why did you rush them coming home?
Why did you leave?
Right. So it's hard to kind of, and I don't envy the position they're in, right? They're under an enormous amount of pressure, and they cannot mess it up. And here's the question: like, if Starliner doesn't come home with Butch and Sonny on board, I don't think they get their full certification, right? And NASA then doesn't get the second provider that they need. I mean, maybe there's some way to work around that and give them the certification, but they've already said that like the Crew 1 mission, which I think was tentatively slated for February, is now going to get pushed back to like August or September of 2025, just because they know they're going to need so much time.
And they're double booking it. They're having SpaceX prep for that as well, which is a
100%.
good indication. I thought all along after we knew these issues that they was not flying again until 2026, which to your point presents a huge challenge. There are going to be changes that have to happen on this spacecraft between now and when it flies again, and they're not going to get to test that out for a year and a half. And so what happens then when that goes? And you might need some more, like this is like an expansion of the universe problem. Like everything's getting farther away from each other, and the space between is also getting farther away from itself. Like this is how the schedule works out for Starliner, because they can at best fly once per year.
You could theoretically, like if all you need to do is recertify like getting astronauts coming home on the ship, like you could fly a mission that doesn't go to ISS and forget all the parking stuff and just put a couple of test astronauts on there and go back up and doing it around, test all the thrusters, do some navigation,
and then be totally out of Atlas V's by the time they need to fly their sixth vehicle.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's already off the table. Let's be honest, right? Like,
yeah, and it's not cheap. I mean, they said yesterday in the earnings, right? It was yesterday, the day before. This delay has cost $125 million, and you tack that on to all of the other,
600 or so,
yeah. So it's getting expensive. I talked to, the head of the space flight division at Boeing. This is like now, I don't know, like 9 months ago, and he came out straight. And it kind of blew me away. It was like, yeah, I don't know if we're in this for the long term. Like, I don't know if I can make a business case, and this is not helping. Like, that's how they were feeling before the flight. Right. And now it's costing them even more money. They've got a new CEO coming in. Is this something they're going to stick with? And then it's like, well, I mean, then you go to Sierra Nevada and you're like, can you guys hurry up and get Dream Chaser like human rated? Like, what do you do? Because as we saw, like Falcon's a great rocket, but it can go down. Like any rocket can go down. So what are you going to do?
Yeah, it's not a good position. I have to ask, there was that news thing. I don't know if it was news, but something popped up in my feed, at least, that there was like a study contract that NASA had issued to SpaceX for like their emergency readiness or something. Did anyone ask any questions about that at the press conferences?
Yeah, and yes, or there was some sort of a statement that was, that was done
we do this all the time, was like the statement.
Yeah, like it's not related to this instance. But on the other hand, we know we have dissimilar redundancy, and SpaceX could go up and get them. I mean, and it's worth noting too. This isn't the first time it's happened. I remember Frank Rubio and that coolant leak on Soyuz, and that's why he ended up like breaking the record for time and space, right? He broke Scott Kelly's record. Then I think it was broken by Mark Van High. I can't remember all these records, but his stay was like extended by several months because they had to send up a rescue Soyuz. So
he moved his seat to the Dragon at the time, right? Didn't they move his seat from Soyuz fully into the Dragon?
Yes.
Just gonna stow away under the floorboard.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's wonky.
I mean, it's a
Can't
little
do
bit,
that in a Soyuz. Can't really have to lay across everyone's lap if you're doing that in a Soyuz. There's no way to sort that one out.
But the thing too about all this is like, I don't think NASA or Boeing did themselves any favors just in terms of the way it was communicated. I mean, I think they're pretty good. They're trying on the one hand to have all these briefings, but them being adamant from the beginning, this was going to be an 8-day mission or a 10-day mission. And that's sort of set the expectation. And then they kept setting all these other dates of when they were coming home. They set like 3 or 4 dates and of course didn't make any of those. And then finally said, oh, it's going to be, it's like indefinite. And by then it, especially by people who aren't covering this day in, day out, they're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And this, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm a little bit touchy because, I get that, they came out and they said they're not stranded and, very forcefully, they're not stranded. And I hate seeing all of those headlines and I get it, and I think we've all reported that because they've made it clear, like in an emergency situation, they can come home in Starliner. And when there was that satellite that came apart, they did go into Starliner and prepare to come home. But then they're also like saying that they're not stuck. And I'm like, well, that's not true. They're stuck. I mean, I'm sorry if I'm on the metro or the subway and it breaks down in between stations, like I'm stuck. And that's kind of where they are. They're stuck for the moment. That doesn't mean that they're never going to get home, but I think they should just own it a little bit more and stop fighting, pushing back on the reports when, you're not doing a great job of communicating in the first place. But that's just me.
The study thing you were talking about, Jake, was around the same time that there was that Eric Berger tweeted this out. I think this was after one of the press conferences that he talked to some sources who apparently they've been quietly studying launching Crew 9 with 2 astronauts and their suits available for Butch and Sunny. I don't know if you talked to these same people, Chris, but have we ever gotten a clear statement that every astronaut has a suit made for them for both spacecraft? Because if that is not already a policy, like that, the result of this incident should 1,000% be that is the policy, that we have these suits. Like once you're no longer an ASCAN, you get fitted for one of each of these things.
Right. Although was Sony at any point assigned to SpaceX? Because
I think she's the only one that's been assigned to this from the beginning.
From the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there was Chris Ferguson for a bit, and then I want to say Fink might have been on this for a little bit as well. They had drifted around. There was
Boeing too at one point, which turned to Dragon.
I don't know, man. I like your thought process there, but that's a lot of suits, Anthony.
Who gives a shit? You don't want to be in this scenario again? Like the whole point was having two options.
It's a fixed price contract. It's a fixed price contract, though, right?
Well, then NASA needs to go buy some more because they realize
buy some more suits.
Yeah, they got to buy some more suits.
Suits are a service now, Anthony. I don't know if you know about this, but suits are a service now.
It's a services contract. It gets calls. We've been meaning to ask you about your extended warranty on these suits.
Yeah. So,
but this is literally the whole point of having, like, it's your point, Chris. They have said this at times during calls that, like, we have redundancy and whatnot. That they have been scared to say that because they don't want it to look like they might come home on a Dragon instead. But that should be an acceptable reason because from the outset it's been like we want 2 things in case one fails. So like there should be suits. If we're paying $1.5 billion for a deorbit vehicle, I think we can probably pay for. I think broadly, it's pretty polarized out there in terms of politics these days. But I think if you polled people, should astronauts have spacesuits? I think everyone would be like, "That's fine. We can sort that out."
Yes, that is included in the expense. Yeah.
Well, we lived through that with the all-female spacewalk when the suit, Anne McClain said it didn't fit,
Yeah.
right? And she pulled herself from the spacewalk. So that caused an uproar. So
Right.
we know we have some test data that shows that, yes, the American public strongly thinks astronauts should have suits that fit.
We support astronauts having spacesuits. Yeah, pretty bipartisan.
Right.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, I don't know. It's this Starliner thing it's obviously getting worse and worse and worse, but I don't know. Like we were joking beforehand. It's like if they end up having to send these astronauts home on another provider, what do you even continue to write about Boeing? Like I don't know how much worse it can get for them. I mean, obviously it can get worse, but like, what do you do about it? Like I'm at the end of like the possible. I'm always like I'm a pretty charitable guy when I think about like unknowns. I was like, well, we don't know this. It's let's take it easy. We'll think through it. This is still a possibility. This is not, I'm running out of all those avenues.
Yeah.
We're
running out of time. We just spent money on a thing that's going to end the ISS.
Yeah.
This is the problem. This is my take with Gateway, right? That like the longer it gets delayed, the closer in time Gateway is to the lunar landings. So its value becomes less. The longer that Starliner gets delayed, the closer it is to the end of the ISS. If they don't make that August 2025 slot, there are maybe 4 flights of Starliner before the ISS is deorbited. So
26,
if you end up
28, 29, 30,
probably that's
31.
it. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know. No one's put a specific date on it yet, but it's probably 2030 to 32 is how the deorbit vehicle stuff is written. So,
and I have a suspicion that the last years of ISS will be a lot of like decommissioning missions, and it'll be all weird operations and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bringing stuff.
So
home
if you get into a situation where you might have 3 operational Starliner missions, you might have 4, like, is it worth the collective churn, right? That I always thought so because you want this redundancy, but there is a point at which it becomes like maybe we should just scrap it and not pay out the operational mission budget and focus that elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. It's milestone based though, right? So they do get paid for the flights. The thing that I'm now wondering is, and it takes sort of a lot of theoretical leaps to get there, but if there is a commercial station in LEO, an orbital reef or the NanoRacks one or the Axiom space station, can NASA transfer the contract to say, okay, instead of flying to ISS, you're going to Axiom, right?
Yeah,
change the language.
That's a good idea.
That, or if by that time Boeing's just like, forget it.
Yeah,
like,
we could, or we just wouldn't.
Right.
We might not.
I need someone to go and do check all the payments for Starliner. I'm really curious to know if if there there's a scale of like we just started this project and now we're done, right? So in terms of like amount of work done, and then there's also a scale for amount of money they've received from 0 to the the 4 point whatever billion it was. I'm curious how mismatched those are. Like, have they done more work and they need to get this money?
Oh, absolutely.
Or have they like, has it been on pace? Like, have they got paid for everything they've done? And if they cut and run, it's not really like a big deal,
I mean, they're paying out. They keep doing this whole accounting business where they're like, lost another $1 billion on this program.
And that makes me think that they have a lot of kind of payment, like it's backloaded, so like the dev work is done. And if they can just get to these operational flights, then they start like bringing in a bunch of revenue that's like really easy, right? So I'm really curious to kind of know.
Yeah, we don't have visibility on how the money works, right? We don't know like when SpaceX flies Crew 9, what money gets sent to them then.
I think we see like people can see payment, like individual payments, like
we can,
like boom, like $128 million was just deposited into SpaceX.
It's like a blockchain kind of thing.
Yeah, and they'll usually put like a project.
Is it in crypto?
So you should be able to go. Yeah.
Elon would probably like that.
Yeah, he would love that. All Doge.
Yeah. In Dogecoin, yeah. No, he doesn't like crypto anymore. I don't know if you heard that, but
I did not. That's news to me because I've been using Twitter, so I feel like a lot of those Elon accounts keep telling me crypto's great. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Starliner,
we should. So you're saying based on that, we skipped over the meat of this conversation, Jake. You're saying we need to pull wherever that's from, all of the ones to Boeing, and know how much has been sent to them already. Do we?
Yeah, because if you've received a lot of payments already, then you're incentivized to cut and run. Like if there's not a lot of extra revenue on the table. However, if it's the flip, like if the dev money was kind of like tight and NASA was expecting you to contribute, but you got the bank like the payout for the actual operational flights, then it's not sunk cost fallacy at that point, right? It's like, no, it's a lot of potential revenue if we can get to this, right? And we've absorbed all this money. The money that we spent on all the that's gone, right? So like, how much money do we have to spend starting today to get to those 6 payouts? And maybe that's a lot, right? So that would be the reason that Boeing would want to keep going. But if it's the other way around, man.
The best indication would be if they make some deal with Amazon to buy one of the Atlas 5s back.
That could happen too, yeah.
That's some Seattle drama.
But just following Jake's math there, right? If there are milestone payments, what do you think they charge per launch? Like $100 million? Something in that range, or is it more? So what's left out there, is at least $600 million. It's even for Boeing, that's like a pretty good payout. Not to mention, like how much money is riding on this? Sounds, maybe a little crass to say that when you're talking about the lives of 2 astronauts, but the financial incentives is what's going to propel the company to keep sticking with it. How much money will it cost them if they don't come home in Starliner and they'd have to do that again?
Yeah. Well, they'd have to fly again, like some sort of cert flight, presumably, right? And that's another write down or whatever, right? So
another Atlas 5, another service module.
Yeah, that'll play into the math
also,
for sure.
Do we know? Like, I did not follow that whole like $125 million loss or whatever it was reported. Are they getting charged for the ISS time? Like, what is the?
I think it's more just the amount of time that they're spending in White Sands testing the thrusters,
and probably a combo, right? Like operational stuff that's going on because the mission's still going on. White Sands time.
Yeah, they had to take a service module right from Cert 1 and bring that out, and dealing with the hardware, getting it ready, getting the engineers, preparing the reports, sending that to NASA, the meeting, all that stuff. I mean, it's.
And that's not Boeing doing that. When you say Boeing brings the service module out to White Sands, it's Boeing paying Aerojet Rocketdyne to do all that, right? So you're going to get a cost there. Like L3 Harris is not going to take that big a hit unless, I don't know. Who knows? I know there's bad blood there too, right? So it's it's a lot. Everyone's going to want their piece. So
for sure.
What a mess.
What a mess.
Man. If only the ISS had more drama going on, If there was more to talk about on the ISS, other than it falling apart, maybe being deorbited, this spaceship's not doing great, the spacesuit's not working. Bad times on the ISS. You would think an enterprising administrator would be using all this to get more funding for the ISS and its follow-on programs. One would think.
Well, Anthony, I think an enterprising administrator would, but...
Yeah. As we discussed in the pre-show, we actually have an ambassador administrator who is treating it like an ambassadorship to NASA.
So. We need to get Eric Berger on here after the Nelson administration is over and see if we can rehash our argument.
Yeah.
Because we had an argument way earlier, Chris, about whether Phil Nelson was a good administrator, and
I think we've had 2 of those already.
Yeah, and Eric
one
was like,
before
no,
he
look,
started, one midstream.
Great, he got SLS flying, all this Artemis Accord stuff, and I said he's not, and so we had a disagreement. And now I'm going to see if he still feels the same.
Well, the idea of him as the ambassador administrator is really interesting. That he's really just sort of embraced the Artemis Accords and signing up all of these other nations now. Something which I think is interesting because I do think there is the way the Biden administration sees the Artemis program is for the sort of soft power diplomacy, which by the way is something that Jim Bridenstine talked about a lot. And Jim Bridenstine and Mike Gold are the ones who sort of came up with the Artemis Accords in the first place, but they see it as a return to this big power, superpower competition with China. And the more people they have on their side, sort of the better. And they're working a lot with the State Department on that. And the State Department, which like early on in the Artemis Accords, I mean, you knew they were sort of involved, but they just weren't as vocal and upfront about it. And now they really want to press it and make it clear that they're, doing a lot of this. But that's a fascinating analogy that Bill Nelson as the, yeah, I mean, because you would think as a politician and, worked in the Senate, he should do what Jim Bridenstine spent so much time doing. And that was like essentially being like a college president. Like they just fundraise. Like we need money, right? That's what college presidents do, right? I need a new athletic facility. It's like, I need a base on the moon. I need, we got to, I need more money. And Jim spent so much time doing that and was somewhat successful because he had such close ties with Pence and the National Space Council and Scott Pace. But we're just, they're keeping, I guess, the SLS and Orion and Artemis budgets going, but it hasn't gotten the real boost.
Yeah.
I mean, and like, not to put too fine a point on it, but if you look at, I think it's a great idea to keep Artemis Accords going. That's been valuable stuff to put out into the world. But then you look at the ISS scenarios that we're in and the Mars sample return specifically. Those two things are areas that, in the Mars sample return case, they actively wanted to punt it until after the election. And in the ISS case, things are in chaos right now, and there's been no movement towards talking about the ISS budget at all or going after a bigger commercial LEO budget when you have the opportunity to do so. US deorbit vehicle is the biggest thing that they went for, and that went from like, we need 500 million, we need $1 billion, we need 1.5 billion pretty quickly. So I can't point to a lot of things that have been like 4D chest from the Nelson, the ambassador, administrator, senator Nelson era.
Yeah. I have like my main thesis right now is this, like, he hasn't managed the money problem post COVID very well, right? Like I think COVID presented like a serious economic problem for everybody, and I think that we didn't, like, it was just, there was nothing good to take away from how NASA managed that, right? Like basically they just canceled a bunch of stuff and like ended a bunch of stuff and kept the SLS lines flat, like,
and let other things go, right? Like Viper up until recently just kind of climbed. Dragonfly is the one that you get heated about too, Jake. That's like all of a sudden a flagship mission. We should talk about Viper. You missed that whole bit.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
And this has been a bugaboo of yours.
I'm just spicy about it. I'm actually, this is a weird thing to say, but I'm kind of glad they canceled it because like we need to make a couple examples of some of these planetary projects that are just going hog wild, man. Like it's out of control and
the heads on stakes theory of planetary science.
But so Viper was always kind of like bad. Like there's if you go back and look at the history, you're kind of like, wow, how did it even get this far? Like you said, right? Because it's like, it was canceled once.
I love that we went from Jim Bridenstine did a great job to like his flagship thing fucking sucked and it needed to be canceled and I'm glad it's gone and it should never come back. It's great.
But that's part of it, right? So like it was already canceled and then like Jim sort of like necromancy'd it out of the garbage bin at NASA Johnson. Like, you are alive. Yeah, I'm bringing you back and renaming you. And then like they made it really important. They're like, yeah, actually this thing that you've never heard of, we need it for Artemis. We don't know where any of the ice is. It's really pivotal now. And they're like, okay, very important. Cool. Awesome. And we're going to put it on this experimental lander program that is designed for like 20 small payloads. And we're going to buy a bigger one and put this as the only payload on it. Well, that seems kind of weird. Yeah, it's right. And then by the way, it's going to triple its budget because whatever reason. And it's like, oh my God, like what a wild story this one was. So yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about that one, and I am weirdly kind of glad that they put the plug in it.
Wow,
that's my spicy take.
Where are you at on this, Chris?
Well, I mean, it's funny because there is this move in the scientific community to sort of like try to save it, and it's just ironic. Like, if the whole point is Artemis is to go to the South Pole and to go to the South Pole because of the water, and you're killing the project that would do the prospecting, then what's the point? What's the point of Artemis then, right?
Yeah.
Are the Artemis 3 astronauts like Jessica Meir going to just start like with her hands, like moving the regolith and like digging it, in the sand?
That's how they did it For All Mankind,
like she's in at the beach, and like, is there water here? So I don't know. And then and you have to wonder too, like at what point, because China seems like they're moving, pretty fast and steadily, and are going to be able to characterize the water with it, whether it's Chang'e 8 or 9. And I keep waiting to this thing about like, oh, they're going to land astronauts there like by 2030, which means before 2030, which means 2029. And then I keep waiting for like 2028. Watch, they're just going to like go early, and like surprise them, or like 27. We're like doing Artemis 2, and they're like going to be waving to us from the South Pole.
I mean, to your point, even static fire test stands can't hold them back. They just go for it.
That was good.
Just go for it.
That was good. That was.
Yeah.
So it's like the whole point is to go get the water, and then and I get it. And it'll be cool so Astrobotic, they're going to do the mission anyway, but with a dummy payload and just land or maybe they can find, I guess John Thornton, the CEO, said they're already talking to other customers and a lot of other payloads on there, but it's just like weird. This is what you've been planning on for however many years. And it's like, well, actually, no, you're going to take something else.
Yeah.
I would love to see one of those contracts too, though, because I don't know how that is legally possible. Like, did they buy? Is this as servicey as it seems? Did they buy delivery of that rover to the moon, or did they buy delivery of a certain payload to the moon, or did they?
I mean, it's all through CLIPS, right? So it's probably follows a bunch of the CLIPS language, and then it's probably just like, we need this much payload space on your lander.
Yeah, but this had like a special built ramp and a special accommodation.
It was all anomalous, man. It should never have existed. This is all wrong. This is like it's against the natural way of how CLIPS was.
I think the crazy thing though with Viper is that it's like the extreme end of the sunk cost fallacy, in that it's probably like apparently it's making it through testing point, still.
You probably should just spend the extra $80 million and get the rover.
Yeah,
like whatever.
Which maybe this is some 4D chess from the Nelson era that we were expecting, but like it. I thought it was not going to go through testing. I thought when they announced this, it was done. But then I saw people talking about it's already done 2 of the 3 tests it was going to do, and it did well. And the last one, they've already component tested. The last one was like thermal or something, and they had already component tested everything. So we're going to save $84 million by not flying it, plus whatever, this is the kicker, is plus whatever we would have to keep spending to keep it in storage until Griffin is ready. That's the real variable.
I mean, and I think part of it though would be that for PR planning purposes, like if this rover is that important to Artemis and then Griffin crashes, which is like not an unreasonable thing to presume could happen, like then what do you do, right? Are you ready to handle that? And maybe NASA was just like, you know what, there's too little upside and too much risk for this to keep going, right? But and I question how important it actually is for characterizing the water at these sites, because I feel like that was kind of like the shoehorned reason for making it exist. Oh, it's part of Artemis, and blah, blah, blah. But I don't know. I don't think it was going to do that much like really critical.
Man, such a Mars elitist. I know. God. One Mars rover drives over a funny rock, and all of a sudden all the other rovers can eat shit.
No. I don't think that.
All right, crazy thread. Weird. Let's do this. Let's do some crazy theorizing on Viper. No decisions get made between now and November, because why would they? Trump wins. Bridenstine sweet talked himself back into the good graces and returns. Does Viper get uncanceled once again? Which of these parts is least likely?
Jim coming back.
Yeah, I think so.
No way.
Yeah.
I am curious who the administrator will be under Trump if he wins, or who would be under Kamala Harris if she wins. I mean, I don't know.
Give us your short lists. Come on, make some predictions. Let's go.
For Trump, I mean, there are some people who are definitely vying for it. I mean, you could see Greg Autry. He's pretty vocal, and was he going to be chief financial officer, but then never took office. He was on the transition team. I don't know. Mike Griffin. you could see him pushing to
Oh,
come
boy.
back and do that. Although I think he wants to kill Artemis outright. But you wonder, I mean, if Pence isn't there, guiding the space policy, like who, is Scott Pace going to come back and advise and sort of be involved? I mean, Artemis is his baby as well. I don't know. Have you guys heard anything?
Well, Anthony has
As if
his
we're
favorite
gonna
theory.
hear
Yeah.
like who. Let's just take a quick account of who's on this show right now. Yeah. Which one of us three writes for the Washington Post? And have we heard anything? Definitely not. No, all else. I have two theories. One is JD Vance likes Diet Mountain Dew. That's a fact that we shouldn't leave out in the wild. I feel like that should just be said for the record. Number two is I have the stupid theory that John Culbertson is going to come back into the fray. My only calculus on this is that he's a Bridenstine-like figure in that he had completely non-parochial interests in space and loved Europa Clipper for no particular reason, and that's where the non-parochial part comes in. I know he was from what town? Like
Houston? I don't know.
But there was some area there, right? Like Southwest-ish? I don't know. Some spacey area, but he would fly to JPL all the time and ask about Europa Clipper. So
Yeah.
that's a dumb theory.
So he's not going to revitalize Viper. He's going to bring back Europa Lander.
Yeah. Oh, Lander, right? It's what it was, right? Yeah.
His name was floated the last time around, I think. When Trump first won, he was in the running.
I'm floating it this time, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's. Although, what do we? He didn't like the Hubble servicing.
Well, nobody did apparently.
That Jared would go and fix the Hubble. I guess he was not for that. That should be NASA astronauts only. But
sounds like he's in the running then. All right. So there's two. All right, on the Harris side, there's two things we got to figure out, right? Give me a scenario. She hasn't announced who the VP is yet, right? I haven't heard it out my window from her event in Philly.
No, it looks like maybe Josh. I mean, who knows? I mean, a lot of people, obviously, in our little neck of the woods, are pulling for Mark Kelly, but seems like
I have all vested interest right now. I like my governor a lot, and Mark Kelly would be rad. So I am pretty split on this.
Yeah. So if it's Shapiro, I mean, that's what a lot of people think too. I don't know. I mean, I think Mark Kelly would just be a boon for the the Space Council. I mean,
but would he pick an astronaut as the administrator?
Yeah, I think
Scott Kelly,
his brother. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Scott would be like. Have you ever talked to Scott? I talked to him a week ago, and I was like, I was actually talking to him about Butch and Sonny, but I did say what are you hearing about? Oh, he's like, I don't know. He's like, gosh, it's a lot of paperwork. Everything he says, he just sounds so grouchy all the time. I love him. He's
seems pretty gruff.
Funny.
Yeah.
Huh.
But it's funny.
I don't know a lot about Mark Kelly's. I said this last week with Lori Garvers on the show, and she had heard him speak at an FAA conference last year or something where he said, I didn't believe this whole commercial space stuff, but I was wrong, which I admire if that's kind of where he's at. But beyond that, he's never really put himself out there in terms of space policy too much.
No, not really.
Yeah, I don't know that. I that's a great point. I don't know that much. I think Scott has, though. I mean, Scott's pretty pro space and commercial space and all that, and sort of the new space movement. The other thing I know, I think they're really close though. So I wouldn't imagine that they're going to have radically different ideas about this stuff.
The interesting thing with the astronauts is that as you get more into this generation that we're talking about, right? The not the young astronaut cohort, but that middle range, who were the ones flying on these new vehicles and saw all of their flight opportunities in the commercial space era, is that there's probably more of an affinity for that, because at an astronaut office level, that's where all the value was in their career, was that direction. It was the new thing that gave them mission assignments. It gave them opportunities. Whereas, the Grunsfeld era, for example, speaking of Hubble, were very much shuttle era, NASA's the way it is, do things the old way. So I I don't think when I think of astronaut administrators, we haven't seen one from this kind of middle era yet. And that could be a significant difference in terms of their general vibes towards, the modern way of things.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's a great point. But look at I want to call it a transformation, but I do think it is that Bill Nelson has gone through. Right. Here's the guy who created SLS, but now if you hear him talk about SpaceX and Blue Origin and the commercial space sector, he's like all in on that, and he's embraced it. He's the one saying, like, we can't do Mars sample return. So what do you got, commercial sector? Like, can you save us, on this? So I do think, I'm of the opinion that, that train has left the station. Like, this is the way we're going. And SpaceX, you can't stop them at this point, and you can't do a whole lot without them. So if you want to have a vibrant space program, which I think people do, then you sort of have to continue that. That the movement now is actually, in some sense, like, it's even more so, because I think people are like, we can't just rely on SpaceX. We need these other guys. Going back to the beginning of our conversation, we need the commercial industry to be not just SpaceX, which, as people have said to me, is there a commercial space industry for real, or is it just SpaceX? Mm-hmm. So that's, a conversation worth having, but I think they need all those other providers to sort of come online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We need more killer apps. That's the problem.
If I hear that phrase again in my life, Jake, I swear to God.
It's true, though.
All right, nobody's got... Scott Kelly is your best guess on who the administrator is if Harris wins. Come on. Who else we got?
I didn't watch the show last week. Did you ask Lori?
She didn't rule out her being contacted. So she was game to talk about it, which I thought was indicative of probably not expecting a call. But
yeah,
I don't know. I figured when she wrote the book, she was like, meh. Like, that the Hillary shot was the shot.
Yeah, it might have been.
Yeah. Now, if this time doesn't work out, we'll get the real book.
The real book.
The second half. Yeah.
The stuff I didn't tell you the first time.
The thing that's interesting is that my theory has been that the closer we get to Election Day, the more space Harris is going to try to open up between her and the Biden administration policies, because they were not polling popularly and it was not going in a good direction. So if that's true, then she would want to get a little bit away from the very close buddy that is Bill Nelson.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. It's a weird spot, right? Because things have shifted significantly in terms of who's friends with who has shifted a lot in the last 4 years. So it's hard to know who still has the ear. And also, it's not like Kamala Harris is not familiar with, like, she is the head of the National Space Council. Has not been a lot of public meetings, but she definitely knows the people involved.
Yeah.
I don't know. Kristen, like really kept up on what the hell was going on with national space policy in these couple of years? Because we didn't get the, like, here's me in front of the space shuttle, but what was happening with that?
Right. No, it's been much more low key under Harris. It's, and part of it is, it's like the SpaceX phenomenon when you compare it to, the Bridenstine era, where they had Space Policy Directive 1 and they're going to the moon, and they had all these other policies, remote sensing regulations, bringing in the commercial space industry. I can't remember which one it was, but the last Space Policy Directive was like done in like December as they're like closing the office.
Yeah.
And
number 6 or something. Didn't they get to 6?
Yeah, I think it was 6. It's a little bit embarrassing. Like, what if you ask me, like, name a space policy that they've passed? I don't know that I have. I don't.
I guess the orbital debris stuff has been pretty hot, right? The no testing
in the ASAT
stuff.
Yeah.
Wasn't really their decision to go into that one pretty hardcore, kind of happened.
Yeah.
Something happened along the way.
As with many things of space policy, it was about something else. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think, the Trump administration showed that, space has, real cachet, and there's, Todd Harrison, from the American Enterprise Institute had this great essay yesterday, and he's talking about like we're not in a space race anymore. He likened it to a space Olympics because there's so many other nations involved, and you're competing in so many different events. From the military to growing a commercial space sector that's going to build this infrastructure that allows us to get to space, and like the moon in of itself, it's like this big team sport. Involving lots of different countries banding together to do it. So it's a whole new sort of dynamic. And I think it actually, once people begin to understand that, will resonate and have at least some effect in national politics, or at least I hope it will, because it's that important.
I mean, if they're looking for somebody, I'll run NASA for sure. Either party wants to call me.
They could consult us.
I should. We'd be good deputies.
Yeah.
I think.
No, I just want to be on the transition team. I want like a short gig.
Actually, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
The off-nominal transition team.
I'll give you a ton of opinions about stuff.
My God, we'd be so good at that.
See you later. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
We just crash at Chris's house.
You just go
hang out for a month.
Yeah, stay with us. They have an office for you at NASA headquarters, and then everyone kind of hates you because you're like telling them everything they did for the past 4 years is wrong.
Yeah. Benefit with us is that we've already told them that, and they've probably listened to at least one of our things where we've said it.
Right. When they look at you, though, in Washington, they call it the weebies, because you're like the political appointees, and they're like, the staffers who are there, and they say, "We be here when you arrive, we be here when you leave." So
yeah. That's that's how I laugh at like when the space billionaires are looking at administrations and they have little tuffles sometimes, right? Where I think didn't Trump and Bezos get into it a little bit at one point? And it's like that's the Bezos thing. They're weebies. Like, dude, I was in charge of the space company before you were president, and I'll be in charge of it after you're president. Like, move on, buddy. Let's go.
Yeah, he offered to fly Trump on New Shepard.
My God, that
can
would
you
be
imagine?
Unbelievable.
Oh man.
Wow. That would be a sight. Who would fly with him? Name the other 5 spots. That'd be great. That would be really good. Shane
wild.
Gillis. I'm putting Shane Gillis in one of the seats so that there's 2 Trump impressions happening in there.
Oh my God.
Yeah. That's a really funny thing. Yeah, New Shepard as like a way to shake out personality traits. I find like a motivating thing, because I feel like I learned a lot about Michael Strahan when he went on there. So grew up, was not a big Michael Strahan fan growing up in the Philadelphia area, but after that I was like, look at this guy going to space. That was good.
Yeah, good dude.
All
right.
Man, I can't get that picture on my hand. That broke my brain for the end of the show. So.
The hair in space, the hair in 0G.
Wow. Man, he would look so uncomfortable the whole time.
Yeah, he would.
Yeah. God, that's.
I don't like this. Let's move on.
No, I need to think about anything else. Literally anything else. Christian, what should people be following of your work these days? Also, we may have spoiled something last week. I don't know if you listened to the show, but we may have spoiled some news.
You spoiled some news?
I didn't. One of the guests did.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you have any news. Do you have any news?
I'm working on a book. I'm on book leave.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did we know that already? I didn't know if we knew that.
I don't think so. I've been pretty quiet about it. I'm now just sort of slugging away, and I'm supposed to be on book leave, but keep getting pulled in mostly because of Starliner. But it's a sequel of sorts to the Space Barons.
Rocket Millionaires. They lost some.
Right.
They lost some. They lost some money. Yeah.
Biggest way to become a millionaire in space: start out as a billionaire. Part 2.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
This it picks up where the last one and focuses on Artemis a little bit more, and this one it does focus on the billionaires, but also a lot on NASA and the Trump era policies, and particularly Jim Bridenstine and this idea that we now have a deep space human exploration program that survived presidential administrations for the first time since Apollo, and what all of that means, and all this talk of China and the geopolitical tension. So it's not out until late next year. So
that's good, because I feel like this fall is going to be busy.
Yeah. So what else? So I know I have Eric's book. What else is coming out this fall?
Oh, I just meant that like there's probably going to be some stuff you need to add to the book after the election.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll come out in time for the next Starliner flight. Yeah.
Oh my God. Eric's book. I don't know when Caleb Henry's book is supposed to come out. He's working on the one.
Yeah, that's right. He's got the OneWeb book.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know if he has a publisher for that yet, though. But yeah, no, that'll be cool too.
It's gonna be good.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice. Jake, you're back now. What do we got? What do we got next week?
Next
a
week we have
wild
kind of a wild one. Yeah. So I don't know if you've ever seen these pictures of when they it came up when Orion was being tested. They had like the Orion space capsule in that room with all the speakers, doing audio testing, vibration testing with the audio. So we have that organization, the people that do the testing as a service coming on. MSI, I don't know. Do you say MSI DFAT? It's a big.
I don't know, man.
It's a company
Look at
that's
this giant thing.
a 7-letter acronym. So these folks are going to come on and tell us how the heck these giant Marshall stacks work, and I'm going to ask them whether they play any Van Halen in it. That's basically the extent of my interview planning so far.
Panama. That's great. That's
Eruption.
hilarious.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. All right. Between this and the Trump on News Shepherd thing, I've just totally flopped at the end of the show. I'm broken. That's all I got.
Welcome to Off-Nominal, baby. I'm
So
back.
good. I will mention, per our politics discussion, I just had Mark Albrecht on Miko, and we got into this from his perspective, having gone through same party transitions, different party transitions. He was involved in the transition eras of McCain, Romney, and original Trump administration. So didn't know that. He was tied in the whole time. So there's some good stuff in there about what happens. So check it out. It's a good one. We got to have him back on here when it's closer to we'll see how things go. And then maybe he won't be able to talk to us, but
yeah.
Who knows?
We'll slot him in after the Chris Davenport book tour. So.
Oh yeah. All right, y'all. Thanks for hanging out with us, Christian. It's always great.
Yeah, it was fun.
We'll see y'all next week. Bye.
Bye.